out for quite a while back. It was How Great the Father's Love for Us. There's a lot of that song in there, so their themes are sticking with it. Today's Lenten journey continues in the book of Luke, 13:31 through 35, but I added 22 as a reference, a physical reference of where they are and what they're doing. Jesus teaches about the entering the kingdom. Verse 22, Then Jesus went through the towns and villages, teaching as he made his way to Jerusalem. At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you. He replied, Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal. In any case, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day. For surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, O Jerusalem, you would kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. This is the word of God for the people of God. Let me know if this mic works any better. Everyone has probably heard of the Aesop's fables. I heard the stories before I knew they belonged to Aesop. And not sure how popular they are now, but it was written by a Greek slave who lived in the 6th century BCE. Let's take a look at the one Aesop fable that this is kind of based on. The Fox in the Hen House. In the story, Aesop story, a fox sneaks into, they call it an outhouse. We have a different meaning for an outhouse, but apparently chickens were out at a distance. A lot of other animals were close. So a fox snuck out into what we now call the hen house, in which a hen was sitting just out of reach. Now the fox tries to cajole this hen to come down. But this hen wisely declines, seeing through this fox's sly maneuvering. Sometimes, under the guise of flattery or care, a manipulative person may take advantage for their own gain. The moral of the story? Beware of interested friendships, or rather fake friendships, based on self-interest. Now, obviously, it was pointed out because of the Pharisees, and I'm sure some of the folks were hearing that would do that. That's probably why we have that cartoon in our bulletin. I mean, this is Lent, and it is Sunday, and an old tradition of mine back in the newspaper days, Sunday editions had comics. So we're Lent, we'll be picking out some. Dr. Luke, as he's known, references a fox and a hen would bring up exactly these connotations for his predominantly Greek readership. Just as Paul would work beside those immersed in other traditions and cultures, acknowledging their religions, but then telling them about Jesus. Using his own experiences and stories about Jesus' life and those of his friends that they could understand. So too, Luke would write to his Greek contemporaries in a language and referencing they could understand in order to tell the stories of Jesus' encounters, his life, his promises, and his true identity. The experience of Jesus in our scripture today brings out some of that rich Greek flavor. Jesus refers to Herod as a fox and himself as a hen who desires to protect Jerusalem from underhanded influence they don't seem to be recognizing. As much as Jesus wants to defend Jerusalem, they want no part in his protection. They do not know Herod as he does. Now, we also must remember this is the same Herod that killed Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, about 3 years earlier. Now he's told by some Pharisees in the crowds that Herod has a mark on Jesus, mark in his own head. Well, Jesus is not surprised. We can hear Jesus lament in this passage about his love and care for Jerusalem. And we can sense his knowing mistrust of Herod, the crafty fox who would destroy his unknowing and ignorant ones. Jesus asserts in the scriptures that although he wants badly to protect and teach them, his colleagues and those in the power of Jerusalem will not listen to him and will not listen to his warnings. Neither did they ever listen to all the other prophets that came to them when they were at their peak, and yet no place to go but down throughout the history of Israel. Those were just threats to their livelihood, and they didn't take time to it. But Herod's culture throughout with the Romans sought to mess up their autonomy and their Jewish culture and even their moral compass. In a sense, it's using cultural metaphors to help people understand the threat of Herod's brand of cultural and moral influence. And it comes out in the behavior of these religious officials that have come to warn Jesus. Does that sound at all familiar? I try to avoid all the politics at the time and let you come to conclusions, but it's no doubt that there's a fox in our head. Now, their house is left to them, as he says, to defend their own. As they say in verse 30, that means the temple's alone and doesn't have Christ there to protect them. A mere 40 years later, Rome would destroy all of Jerusalem and tear down the temple. Jesus knew that. Can you feel the pain in Jesus' spirit? Like a parent with children leaving the nest for the first time. It almost feels palpable, doesn't it? Somewhat helpless, and other times, do they come back or do they go out on their own? He cannot save them, and they do not believe they need to be saved. When they look at Herod, they see a compatriot. They cannot see the fox. Does that sound familiar at all in today's world? Now, just like Old Testament studies that always got me, I would use a 400-year roller coaster, I called it. Israel would build up, lose their way, lose their moral compass, and then they would collapse. I got thinking about that a lot this week. It's like a house of cards. You take a long time to put the cards together and make some great edifice, whether it be cards or cups. And yet, in a moment, they can fall down. I think that's what's happening now. Because even though our culture has drifted, and it doesn't make any difference what party, sooner or later, slowly but surely, our governments, our churches, our structure have grown to be untenable. And they're going to fail one way or another, or somebody will come in and a fox will come in and scatter the hens. That's what he means by now their house is left to them. The Romans would destroy soon. Throughout time, as in Jesus' time, cultures and powers, self-centered self-centered, self-sufficient acquisitions have always offered snares, traps, self-promotions, and disguises that Jesus might call a bit foxy. But our best way to discern what is true and what is fake is to allow Jesus into our house. It's important, I think, to understand the Hebraic idea of what it means to be a hen house because we have so many years between us. Jesus called Herod a fox after some Pharisees warned him that he wanted to kill Jesus. And in response to the challenge, you tell Herod, I've got work to do. Don't tell that fox. Herod was sly. He wasn't saying that Herod was sly, but Herod was being inept or unable to carry out his threat. Jesus questions the tetrarch's pedigree, moral status, leadership status, that put the tetrarch in his place and how he got there. This fits the rabbinic ways of what it meant to be a fox back then. Jesus implied that Herod was not a lion. Herod probably pictured himself at the top of the heap. Herod considered himself a lion. But Jesus points out that Herod was the opposite of a lion. Jesus translates fox, a pompous pretender, an opportunist, and predator. Jesus was direct. And one of the things I've learned is there's a lot of Herod in the scriptures, and it's not always the same one. The one that built the temple way before Jesus was there when the Jews came back, and that's Herod the Great, you might have heard. Then he had his son, Herod Agrippa, who rebuilt and did stuff, and just before Jesus' time. And then there was Herod Antipas that came into power, this grandson of Herod the Great. And he probably pictured himself as some great leader, but he was a half-breed and only a grandson. Jesus knew where he was going. He probably never had a set of written goals, but there was no hesitation. No hesitation of what he had to do. He had to go to Jerusalem. Surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. I can't remember which one of the two great prophets. He would warn them, and they didn't want to kill him because they knew he was a prophet. They threw him in a well, as if that was better. I'm hoping it was dry now. But they did stone a lot. And in Jesus' time, the Romans were getting pretty tired of uprisings. That's probably one of the reasons why Jesus wouldn't do it like the other ones, because Rome was about had it, and they were putting down one uprising after another. But they saw Jesus was different. But it was the Jewish leaders that really wanted Rome to clean up one more time. I love the part, surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. Jesus knew that going to Jerusalem would be fatal for him, and yet he did not turn back. He was committed. He was courageous. Most importantly, he just cared. He wanted to turn back. In my readings for this week, for illustrations, there was a story of a young farmer who lived in the Midwest, and he heard that his father's farm and had lots of chickens, had a big fire in the hen house. Apparently one of the lights or one of the heaters had went bad, and as soon as the fire department left and cleaned the fire out, they were over there trying to pick up the mess and appraise the damage, and they opened up the door that gets closed at night. And there, leaning up against the door, was a dead mother hen, all burnt and up against the door. And as they started the process of removing the chickens and stuff, the ones that were dead, as they lifted her up in wings, out popped 4 live little chicks. Like that hen, Jesus laid down his life for the helpless, the clueless, and the stubborn. And it says, while we were yet sinners, that's what we say to our communion, and Jesus made sure we understood no greater love can a person have than to lay down his life for someone. But let's not rush through the salvation story, for Easter's quite a ways away, and this is Lent. A time to take in all the subtleties, even the heartaches that Jesus had. Luke is interesting in that he does a lot of Jesus' teaching in that journey between home and Jerusalem and his destiny at the cross. But for now, let's stay under the shelter of God's loving grace.